Okay, so the two laws of deductive reasoning that we're going to talk about are the law of detachment and the law of syllogism. We're going to talk about the law of detachment first. And both of these are ways of logically drawing conclusions and proving different statements in geometry. Okay, so let's talk first about the law of detachment. So this left side is the law of detachment. So I'm going to explain to you what the law of detachment is, but it's going to make more sense when you see the example below. So the law of detachment says that if a conditional is true and its hypothesis is true, then the conclusion would be true as well. So for example, if P then Q is a true statement and P is true, then Q is true. Okay, so let me give you an example. They're going to involve two statements. Here's the given statements. Right here, the first thing that you're going to see is a conditional. If M is the midpoint of a segment, then it divides the segment into two congruent segments. Okay, that's a conditional. The hypothesis is true, the conclusion is true. Okay, so the question is, how do we use the law of detachment? Well, there's another statement here that's detached from the statement or the conditional. It says M is the midpoint of AB, and I've highlighted these for a reason because I wanted you to see that the statement that comes separately from the conditional, the statement matches the hypothesis of the condition. Look, they both say the midpoint. The midpoint. M is the midpoint of a segment, M is the midpoint of segment AB. They match, okay? So if M is the midpoint of a segment, then it divides a segment into two congruent segments. So if M is the midpoint of segment AB, then what conclusion can you draw? Well, you should be able to see that since this matches the hypothesis of the conditional, we can draw a specific conclusion that matches the conclusion of the conditional. If M is the midpoint of AB, then M divides the segment into two congruent segments. Okay, so M divides AB into two congruent segments. And those segments, if you think about it, I'll just draw it out over here. If you were drawing a line segment AB and M is the midpoint, this segment and this segment would be congruent. So AM would be congruent to MB. That's what we're saying. We're just giving a specific example based upon this conditional. So you'll notice that the hypothesis matches the other hypothesis. That's what this means. If we have a conditional that's true, and then we have another statement that matches the hypothesis, that's why they're both P, then the same conclusion that's in the conditional would be the conclusion for that hypothesis. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay? So that's the law of detachment. So in the next video, we're going to look at some more examples of the law of detachment.